All right. Welcome to the Frogs of War podcast. Welcome back. We are recording again after a week off, after a bye week. We are here, Iron Skillet week, SMU hate week. And we're back with this is Anthony North. I'll introduce myself. And with me here, we've got Russ Hodges. And Russ, welcome to the podcast. I'll let you introduce yourself, and you've probably seen him around at Frogs of War for quite some time, doing great work for us. But Russ, I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been contributing here at Frogs of War for about 2.5 years now. Started out during COVID. Was looking for a little bit of a side hustle. I'm a sports editor for a living. So TCU graduate as well, graduated 2016. So it's kind of my way of giving back and staying involved and just keeping myself busy, as a creative. And it's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to talking some football today, talking some SMU and just what's going around in the Big 12 and around the country. Excited. Let's get this going.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, let's jump into it. We'll hit a few quick news things, some stuff that's happened in the last week or so. We'll talk about back at the Tarleton State game, TCU victory, and then we'll jump into SMU stuff and get ready for this big week ahead. So first thing on the news, so TCU Soccer is about to kick off Big 12 conference play this week, starting on Thursday with a home match against number 20 Texas. So a big match at Garvey Rosenthal. So everybody come out, check out the team. They've been on a bit of a roll. So a couple weeks back, they dropped a few, but then this last week or so, 2 road wins, Texas A&M and Texas State, and then a home draw with Harvard, who is also ranked. So some good things happening and really strong play. Messiah Bright, Tyler Isgrig have been superb and getting national honors and all of that. So exciting times on the soccer fields. We've also had some basketball news. So Russ, what's been going on the basketball side?
Yeah, a couple things I was able to get up earlier today. One thing people probably saw if they follow TCU basketball on social media is we got some new threads coming in for this year. Interesting look. I like it. A lot of the same stuff that we've seen from traditional TCU. Got the traditional colors and lettering and everything, but we got a nice little zigzag sort of pattern going down the sides, and I got to throw some of that red in there. I know that's been kind of the thing over the last several years, and I like that it's a little bit of a hint of the red. It's not too much. Me personally, that's kind of I like the red when it's in there, just not a little too much. I think they look really nice, and you got to help me out here, Anthony. I don't know if the zigzag pattern along the sides, is that a callback to any sort of like a throwback design, or is that just new? I thought it might be some kind of a callback, maybe.
I don't know. I didn't recognize it right off the jump. I mean, I think when they were teasing kind of the idea of this coming out, I thought it might. If you've seen some of the Memphis Grizzlies jerseys, they have this trim that has like kind of that pattern in there. I thought maybe it was going to be kind of a nod to Desmond Bain and that Grizzlies jersey, but. Yeah, I don't know if it's anything in particular, but it's the touch of red is probably, I think, the best use of the red that TCU has put out on any of the jerseys. I mean, I liked back when the football team played LSU at Jerry World, they had like some cool helmets that had some red on it. The more recent football jerseys,
the chrome red streaks they had coming off
that was pretty slick.
I remember that game. That was
pretty slick. The red jersey or the red trim on some of the lettering on like the really dark purple and black jerseys the last couple seasons, I think that's been a hit or miss opportunity, but this one really, it pops, and I like it. And I like on the dark purple jersey in particular, where it's got kind of the thick white trim and then the red down the sides. They're really slick, and they're gonna look really nice, playing in the Final Four. I think that's what's most important.
We're gonna get that rematch with Arizona in the
There you
tournament.
go.
Counting on it, but they look nice. And then we also had a little bit of news as well with a report that Damion Baugh is appealing a suspension that has been handed down from the NCAA for an undetermined amount of games, and it reportedly stems from Damion signing with a non-certified agent. This was back when Damion had declared for the draft and was testing the waters. Obviously, he and Mike Miles were two guys who had wanted to test the waters before ultimately they decided to come back. And obviously, the hype is very real for this team with everybody coming back, and Eddie Lampkin and O'Bannon, and you have a lot of experience. You have a lot of basketball writers, insiders who think this could be a top 15 team, perhaps in preseason poll, maybe even top 10, a few weeks in. And you hope that there isn't any serious missed time, but just by reading the report, it doesn't sound like anything too serious. I know in the report there were some quotes from his mom, and it, if anything, just seemed kind of more like a misunderstanding than anything. I believe Damion has a kid, and he's just trying to do the best thing for his family. So,
absolutely. I mean, it's a really tricky thing. I mean, the rules are pretty vague and gray, and they've been changing. And yes, you can sign with an agent, you can declare for the draft and then return with your eligibility intact. But I guess there's just a special list of agents that you can sign with, and if you're not on that list, you don't count, and then it's breaking the rules at that point. I don't know. The NCAA is not an organization most known for its consistency, or so
you would be correct.
I think it's a tough situation, but I hopefully TCU and the powers that be get it worked out. And if Ball has to miss some time for something silly that he just missed there, then it'll be what it is, and the rest of this team will pick up the slack, and then maybe it'll give an opportunity for some of these young guys coming in to get some early playing time on some of these non-conference games that the Frogs should be able to clean up a little bit before they hit the meat of the schedule.
Yep, 100% agree.
So what else in news? We've got some football news this week too.
Yeah, just a couple small injury things. I know Sonny Dykes had spoken to the media yesterday and just talked about a couple guys who've been banged up. Most notably, Chandler Morris is out for SMU. I don't think that's a huge surprise to anybody. Of course, he went down in the Colorado game with a knee injury. And last week, Sonny had said that he's started his rehab. He's making progress, I guess, and he's going to be back sooner rather than later. I'm sure TCU is just being safe, and especially considering the way that Max Duggan played against Tarleton, there's really no need to rush him back, especially when you consider that Oklahoma is after SMU. So the schedule is only going to get more difficult from here. So, of course, he's not going to play, but Sonny Dykes did say that Bud Clark, free safety, and Marcel Brooks, linebacker, may play in this game. Marcel, I guess, is going to dress and try to give it a go. He's been banged up for quite a while now. Had I believe it was a rib injury that he suffered during fall camp, and was a little discouraging because I guess he had been making some really strong impressions on the new staff. And obviously he's a former 5-star prospect, transferring from LSU, played receiver actually last year after starting out as a linebacker under the new staff at TCU. They moved him back to linebacker, and going from a 4-2-5 to a 3-3-5, you need a little more depth at that linebacker position. So things seem to be trending up for him, regardless if he is able to play or not. And then Bud Clark is, again, another really talented young player, a former 4-star recruit that could have been in line to potentially be the starter, but had an injury. And Abe Kamara has filled in pretty well. He had 2 pass breakups against Tarleton, had a couple tackles against Colorado, and hopefully, again, it doesn't sound like anything too major with Bud Clark. So more positive news on the injury front for TCU as they get ready for the Iron Skillet this weekend.
Yeah, you hit on Kamara. Kamara's been really a nice surprise. I don't know that it, at least for me, I hadn't really known the name or known, that he was going to come in and play, and he's been playing really well. For Brooks, yeah, that the linebacker depth is certainly a concern in the 3-3-5, and already it's hit a few snags. So getting Brooks back, and all indications were that he was really ready to put in a good amount of contribution for the Frogs. So good there. And yeah, the message on Chandler Morris seems to still be that, oh, it's going to be sooner than later, which I think is a little bit surprising. At the Tarleton game, he was on the sideline in a big, huge knee brace on crutches. I think it's encouraging that everyone is saying, it's not like a torn ACL, or it's not a season ending thing, but I think it's going to be more than this 2-3 weeks. It seems more significant than that. And maybe that's just trying to keep everybody on their toes or trying to feel optimistic, but I don't know. It feels like maybe that's not quite as soon as like in the Oklahoma game. I don't know. I can't see him running out there and taking the field first snaps in that game either at this point.
Yeah, and now I don't know if you happen to catch his Instagram. I guess he posted something that might have been kind of cryptic. Can you shed any light on that? Because I didn't see it by the time I
no, I did see it. I mean, it was I think it was just a what is it, the hourglass emoji, and a picture of him on the field. So like in. I think it was not a recent picture of him. I think it was a picture of like from fall camp or something maybe. And it was, but the cryptic part was the hourglass emoji. Like,
as a former Sooner, he's going to want to be on that field for Oklahoma, but
for sure.
Again, I think with Duggan and also with the way Sam Jackson has played, I know he's a young player, but he has been very good in his limited reps, very fast. He's quick to get out of the pocket and make plays in the running game, and has made some nice throws too. So I think, it's not a situation where you have zero depth at the position. You can afford to be a little more patient with him because you have a senior quarterback with a lot of experience who, what he can do well and what he can't do well. And then you have a young player behind him. So, hopefully we get him back in, a couple weeks, and until then it's the Duggan Jackson show for the Frogs.
Yeah. And I think Frogs probably feel in pretty solid hands with those guys. And it's the blessing of, we waited all off season to find out who the quarterback was. And it turns out all of the guys are still getting their opportunity. So that's great. All right, let's jump into just a little bit of a look back at the Tarleton game. I know we're now 2 weeks away from it, but we haven't had a chance to really talk through it here. So I guess just from the jump, it's hard to take too much from a game against an FCS opponent. How much of that is just pure talent advantage from being at the level that TCU is versus Tarleton State. And that said, TCU victory, 59-17, and it was a career day for Max Duggan. Career high yards, career high touchdowns. He was everything that we had all kind of hoped for him to be during his time at TCU, and really dropping dimes in for touchdowns, showing some touch. He had a few of those bullets that kind of hit the receivers in the head instead of, they're a little too close, but for the most part, he was really showing some growth on some of those things that maybe we were hoping for coming into the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when you look at it as a whole, Max Duggan played the way that he was supposed to play. And I think he came out and used the short intermediate areas of the field really well. He was hitting guys in space. And when you have the kind of playmakers that TCU has this year in Quentin Johnston and Darius Davis, who's off to a tremendous start, and Tay Barber and Jordan Hudson, who we'll talk about a little bit, I'm sure. These are guys who get him the ball and let him get yards after the catch. And you saw a couple of those, touch passes where they get Darius Davis the ball, they get him going around the end. And I think we know enough about Max at this stage of his career. We know he struggles on the deep ball, but he hits the short intermediate areas of the field well. I thought the 10, 15-yard routes, he hit a lot of those in this game and played with a lot of confidence, had command of the offense, made good decisions, and that's a good building block going into this SMU game coming up.
Yeah, and I think it was encouraging. Something that maybe we haven't seen in the past is really opening up the offense, even against overmatched opponents. This is your opportunity to work out any of your kinks out there. Throwing those short intermediate passes, get Max on a rhythm, get the offense rolling. Yes, you could always roll out there and Kendre Miller run for 4 yards a carry, 6 yards a carry, whatever, and you roll to a win over an overpowered opponent. But I think it was nice to see that the coaching staff opened things up a little bit and really let the ball fly, and still took the foot off the accelerator. I mean, Max didn't even play the fourth quarter at all, so it's not like they ran up the score or anything crazy, but they did allow that offense to play at full capacity for a good part of the game, which was nice to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think when you look at the receivers, Jordan Hudson had a really nice performance. There's a lot of talk about him coming in as a true freshman, and especially now with Quincy Brown, unfortunately, going down with that ankle injury late in that game, and he had a really nice performance, and I thought played pretty well last year with Damion Williams out. Showed some flashes as a young player, big body receiver at 6'4", but hopefully the Frogs can get him back at some point down the line this season. But it's going to give an opportunity for some of these other guys like Jordan Hudson to come in and get more reps. And I thought his body control was really well, was done really well. That touchdown catch he had late in that game spoke highly of Max Duggan. And I think that, again, speaks to Max's leadership, and excited about what this receiving group can do this year, especially with the amount of size that the group has. I mean, when you line up Quentin Johnston, who's 6'4", Savion Williams, who's 6'5", Jaquarius Spivey, who's really a tight end receiver hybrid like TCU's had, and guys like Pro Wells and Artavius Lynn, another big body at 6'5". It's going to be a matchup nightmare, I think, in the red zone for some of these teams to put out 5'10", 5'11", 6-foot DBs and ask them to cover some of these guys.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the tight ends. I think it was nice to see the tight ends got involved a lot in this game as well. So Jared Wiley with a touchdown, several other Blake Noel, several other tight ends all got good opportunities out there. I think a lot of them actually are listed as wide receivers on the depth chart and on the official roster, but I mean, they're like, yeah, like 6'7", 280 or something. That's not, I don't know that that's a wide receiver, but getting all those guys involved, offense looked good. And the running game was good too. I think, again, that's the TCU offensive line played solid, opened the holes, kept Max protected. And yeah, I think the running game in this next game, and we'll talk about SMU in a little bit, but I think that's where we need to see some breakouts and see it against, I guess, a higher quality opponent. Here against Tarleton, Kendre Miller had a touchdown. Amani Bailey had a long run breakout, kind of sprint run away from the defense touchdown. Exciting to see. On the defensive side, did give up 17 points to Tarleton State, which is probably not what you want to see, but One of those touchdowns was really late and in full garbage time. But I think generally stout. The couple of interceptions, Josh Newton, who has been just like an absolute huge addition from the transfer portal from Louisiana Monroe, had a physical interception where he talked about after the game about how he just took that space from that receiver and kept him out of bounds and took the ball. And then McMillan with an acrobatic, just kind of diving, jumping, leapt through the air to catch an interception. So good to see that happening. But overall defense looked good. Do you have any thoughts on how the defense looked?
Yeah, I think, like you said, Josh Newton had a nice game. It's cool to see how he's sort of emerged as a leader for this team already, even though he's been with the program for a short time. But someone that the coaches have talked about quite a bit. I know he was highlighted, I think, by the Star Telegram last month, just for his play during fall camp and the way that he's emerged as a leader. I thought coming into this season that you knew Trey Tomlinson was going to be one of the starters at corner, and I kind of thought the other spot was going to be Noah Daniels to lose. But
yep.
you have to be really encouraged with Josh Newton and also the linebackers. I think D. Winters and Johnny Hodges, the transfer from Navy, have both done really well at those outside backer spots. Again, it's a new scheme, going from really having two inside backers to one middle and two outside backers. I think they're going to be used in the pass rush a little bit more, perhaps, than they've been in the past, and especially when you have some guys at DN like Dylan Horton, Terrell Cooper, and others that are coming from a scheme where they were D tackles in a 4-down line, pass rushers at DN, kind of different techniques, and having to change their bodies a little bit and be bigger. You normally see your DNs in a 3-down line formation that are a little bit more size and filling up more holes. So I think D. Winters has really done well in that type of role, and definitely something that is going to be a key as we get ready for SMU is this is Tanner Mordecai, and this is a quarterback with a lot of experience and is capable of lighting up the scoreboard and putting up yards. And not to mention they have Rashee Rice, who is a very talented playmaker, and they're going to have to find ways to make Tanner Mordecai uncomfortable. I think they'll have to get creative with some blitz packages, and Williams, the freshman nose tackle, I think has had an unbelievable start for a kid who just turned 18 years old.
Yes,
at 320 pounds to step in, right away under a new scheme and play the way he has is super encouraging. So this will be really the first significant test that this defense has faced this season. I'm interested to see how it shakes out this weekend.
Yeah, and I think we're being a little bit kind and coy about significant tests. I mean, Colorado it's come to show that they're probably one of the worst teams overall in the country, certainly one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country, and an FCS team. So yes, this is absolutely the biggest test coming up, and we'll see. And you kind of touched on it, but yeah, there were no sacks against Tarleton State. So is that a concern? Is that maybe that just wasn't the focus of the game plan? But yeah, Tanner Mordecai is an athletic guy who can get the ball where he wants to put it, and you gotta put him in bad situations. So we'll need to be putting him in pressure, and so hopefully that defensive front and the linebacker scheme can find some way to get to him. The other thing that was a little bit of concern out of the Tarleton game is giving up some deep pass plays. Tarleton, we talked about it before the game of they do have some talented receivers, some guys with some recruiting pedigree, and recruiting pedigree at the quarterback position. So not totally. And we also knew that this was going to be the game plan, that they were going to look to hit big plays. They were going to toss it deep. But they did get a few of those to come through. And when it's Rashee Rice and Tanner Mordecai and the SMU scheme, it's going to be it's brought up several notches there. So definitely something to watch going forward. All right, so we'll move on from way back in week 2. We'll quickly hit on some of the Big 12 happenings this past weekend in week 3, while TCU got to sit back and watch. Let's see. I'll put it to you. Which of the games from the Big 12? We can review all of these. Just talk through them quickly. But which of the games from the Big 12 were you most interested in from this last weekend watching football?
There were a couple that stood out. I think obviously Kansas going on the road and getting another quality win against a Houston team that was ranked in the top 25 last week when they played a really close game against Texas Tech. Kansas is legit. I think Kansas is. They are not a doormat in the Big 12 anymore. They are not a doormat in college football. Lance Leipold, his staff deserve a lot of credit. They have a lot of players who a couple years ago were very young, raw players that are beginning to develop, and they run the football extremely well. They have multiple guys who can carry it. Jalen Daniels has avoided turning the ball over, and it's been really fun to see. You know, they go hang 55 on West Virginia and Morgantown, which is a difficult place to play, ending that game with a pick 6. They go to Houston against a former Big 12 coach and Dana Holgerson and hang 48 points on them, and they're off to a 3-0 start. So I think you can't – nobody should consider Kansas an easy win anymore. So that was a game that stood out to me. And then also on the other side, you have Kansas State, who loses to Tulane and only puts up 10 points. And this is a team that brought in Adrian Martinez, the quarterback transfer from Nebraska. They have Deuce Vaughn back. Obviously, he's a tremendous playmaker for them. He's been off to a terrific start this year, but a little discouraging overall to see the way that Kansas State has performed. Obviously, getting a win against a pretty mediocre Missouri team, I don't think that means a whole lot, but Kansas State can play some defense. I don't think that's something that's going to change, but you look at the numbers that Martinez has put up, and they've really, really struggled to move the ball through the air. So I think it's really become a contained Deuce Vaughn, and you have a very good chance of beating Kansas State. So those are two that stood out to me.
For sure. So I'll jump in, I guess, on the Kansas. Man, couldn't have been more wrong on this. So all off season, our podcast and everything, I took Kansas on the under win total 2.5. They're already over that. I said no way they're not going to win a Big 12 game this season. Already got that. And they're not just squeaking these games out either. They're really putting up impressive performances. So, be afraid of the Jayhawks in football. That's crazy. So, maybe we shouldn't have been so hard on Texas for losing to the Jayhawks last year. I don't know, but
you have to wonder, did that win kind of do something for the program? Because I felt last year, Kansas played TCU competitively, and they had a few games where they were competitive and they couldn't win. They just couldn't do enough. But it's not like every game was a blowout like it's been in the past. And being able to win that game against Texas, sometimes in sports, a win can just change the tide for a program. And the players, a lot of these players, again, they've been through the ringer. They've been brought
grinding through those winless conference seasons. Yeah.
Started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Yeah, there you go.
I think they're going to keep trending upward for sure.
And a place that maybe Leipold and one of those Kansas State coaches might end up going to the opening in Nebraska, where There was some thought that maybe similar to how after Gary Patterson was left last year for TCU, went out and then beat Baylor, that maybe Nebraska, after losing Scott Frost or relieving him of his duties, maybe that would light a fire under the Cornhuskers. And no, that was not the case. Oklahoma went out and completely handled them in Lincoln.
Mhm.
And not surprising, certainly, but I think the spread on that one was only like 11 points. There was a lot of talk that, maybe Nebraska's a better team, and maybe they get some coaching in there and it works out. But I think Oklahoma is maybe just not getting enough credit. I think that's a really, really good team. Yes, they're ranked like 6, or they're somewhere in the top 10. But I think they're a scary team right now, and look to have fully rebounded from, there was all this trauma off season of Lincoln Riley leaving and Caleb Williams leaving, and it's terrible and we're so sad. But Brent Venables has come in and done a really great job, and I think that they could be primed for a big special season, and maybe this is the year they go out and win a playoff game, and I think that would be kind of maybe just funny that Riley leaves, and that's how it goes down. That's when they get their best season. But
and they have some good skill talent, and not to mention they bring in Dylan Gabriel from UCF, who's very experienced and a really talented quarterback. I think he was one of the biggest transfers on the market. So for him to land in Oklahoma, they have an experienced quarterback who's capable of winning football games, and a good receiving core led by Marvin Mims. So anytime you have that kind of talent at quarterback and at the skill positions, you're going to have an opportunity to win a lot of games. So they kind of overcame that slow start against Kent State last week. I think that was like a 7-3 game at halftime, and then they blew them out in the second half. But it'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma gets through the season. A little bit of a different team. You got a new coach, and like you said, Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley at USC. I'm sure we'll talk about USC a little bit later when we get to the national landscape of things. But overall, when you look at how the Big 12 has started the season, I think you have to be pretty encouraged. There have been a lot of competitive games, and going into this weekend, you have some really good matchups like West Virginia and Virginia Tech. Of course, you have the battle for the Iron Skillet and a few others as well. So I always enjoy watching the Big 12, and just how it's the only Power 5 where everyone plays everyone. I know some people aren't a fan of the round robin format, but I think that's how you truly figure out who the best team is. That's just
it makes for a tough path. I know. I think that's probably where people are like, oh man, I have to play all these teams and then I have to beat the second best team again in the conference championship game. And it certainly makes for a tough path. And this season looks to be some strong teams. Plus, if Kansas is going to be good and Texas Tech is better than they were, feels like, it's even with Kansas State losing this game to Tulane, they could just as easily go out this week and beat Oklahoma. I mean, that's the level that this conference is very even top to bottom. And if Kansas isn't going to be a bottom feeder, then it's really going to be a gauntlet through conference schedule.
Yep, and Iowa State beating Iowa in a rock fight, 10-7. I know I know Iowa struggles to score points, but listen, that's another classic rivalry game. And when we talk about SMU a little bit, I'm sure we'll talk about rivalry games in general as well, and how that's kind of a trend going away in college football with realignment and new conferences, and schools going from one conference to the other and not being able to play. I know Bedlam, that's been something that people have talked about recently. Now that Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC, there's going to be no more Bedlam series, and Mike Gundy had some comments about that. But you like to see some of those, traditional rivalry games. But back to the main point, Iowa State gets a win there, and Ames can be a really difficult place to play. I mean, TCU has struggled in Ames multiple times, along with other Big 12 teams. So you have to bring it every week, man. It's not like some of these other conferences where you might get a cheap matchup with a weaker team in the other division. You got to bring it every week.
That's right. So just wrapping up week 3 quickly. So some national big games that may have an impact across the board. So the big ones were Oregon destroyed BYU at home, and then Penn State went to Auburn and really crushed them. The BYU game, I think, is kind of unfortunate generally for Big 12 kind of, I don't know, strength of schedule type of thing where Baylor loses that game to BYU and then BYU goes and loses to a Pac-12 team. I think that may take away some of the strength there of those transitive victories. You know how the national media uses that as ways to compare teams down the stretch, or who knows what playoff committees are thinking, but that's the kind of thing that comes back later. And then, the Penn State defeating Auburn, I think we could be looking at another Power 5 coach opening there in Auburn soon enough. The other 2 games of interest from national were Wake Forest barely escaping Liberty and UCLA barely escaping South Alabama. So a couple of Wake is a ranked team, a couple of, big name brands that were on the brink against G5 competition.
Mm-hmm. And Wake's got a matchup coming up against Clemson. I'm very interested to see how that plays out because I don't think Clemson has been impressive at all. DJ Uiagalelei, I'm sorry if I butchered the name. I hope I didn't. But he's a quarterback who obviously came in after Trevor Lawrence and was very highly regarded. It just seems like they struggle to move the ball now. They struggle to move the ball, and I'm not exactly sure why. I haven't watched enough Clemson football, honestly, but that's a game that I could see coming down to the wire coming up. And you mentioned Oregon and BYU. I know Oregon got blown out by Georgia, but 2 things there. I feel like Georgia right now is kind of in a class of its own. Alabama, of course, is number 2, but I don't think they've been as impressive as their rank shows. Georgia, to me, just the way they defend under Kirby Smart and the experience they have at the quarterback position with Stetson Bennett, I feel like they're just they're the best team in the nation by a pretty significant margin right now. And
Definitely.
Then, Washington beat Michigan State pretty handily.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And I was watching that with a good buddy of mine who I grew up with, who is a Michigan State alum. So wasn't a good experience for him, but Michael Penix looked really good in that game for Washington, and it really wasn't that close. So maybe some of these Pac-12 teams are a little bit better than they're getting credit for. I think looking at our run list here, USC is only a 6.5 point favorite against Oregon State. Is that true? I feel like that's
in Corvallis. I don't know. I guess it's crazy things can happen. I don't know, and Oregon State's looked pretty strong. They've had the Pac-12 is probably better than we all would have thought going into the season. Despite Oregon, getting crushed by Georgia, but I don't think you can hold that against anybody. That Georgia team is just too much for anybody to handle. From this week, also another Power 5 coaching opening with Arizona State losing to Eastern Michigan ended the Herm Edwards experience there at Arizona State. So my first thought on this, because I'm still tied to Gary Patterson emotionally, is what do we think that Gary Patterson will be a Power 5 coach next season? I think with the game against Alabama, he had a tweet that was pretty funny. It was kind of like, everyone is reaching out to tell me how awesome I am and how great this was, and it was like, what happened to win by 1? I guess now it's lose by 1. It's but his name will definitely get mentioned in a lot of these things. And I guess, what do you think? Do you think he'll actually take the leap right back into a Power 5 spot? Will he take something, at a G5 level, or is he happy
I
to hang out in Austin?
I think what can be seen clearly is that he still has a desire to coach in some facet. He still has that passion, and there were a lot of people talking after that Texas Alabama game, and even during the game, that even like former players were tweeting out that Coach P's got these boys playing some tough defense, and yeah, I could definitely see him. His longtime buddy Jared Hill is back as a head coach at New Mexico State after serving as the interim for TCU when Gary and TCU parted ways. I think if there's one thing about Gary that we can't question, it's the passion for the sport, and I think if the right opportunity presented itself, it wouldn't surprise me if he made that leap. I think anytime you're a former head coach, especially a head coach with as much experience and as many accolades, and someone who's recruited as well as he has, because a lot of people, I think, take for granted how much recruiting actually goes into the job of being a head coach. Off season, that's a lot of what these coaches are doing, and under Gary, TCU always recruited pretty well. So it wouldn't surprise me. I think obviously something like that where he potentially takes an opening wouldn't happen until long after the season. But I'm sure he would be all ears. I think he's been around the block long enough to where it's almost like it's a business move. And if there's the right situation for the right price, and he thinks he can continue to have that passion for the sport, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping he would just move on to doing television or calling games or something, because he's always so good on those like the coach's room during the national championship, stuff like that. That was always like, yeah, clearly his football brain is still there, and like you said, he's definitely still got that itch to get out there and coach. So I'd be surprised if he hangs it up there. He'll get a call, and I think he'll take one of these spots going forward. All right, we are over 40 minutes in, and we haven't started talking about SMU yet. So here we go. Saturday morning, 11 a.m. At SMU. Horned Frogs, Iron Skillet game. A lot of emotion. Lot of heated rivalry stuff going on here. So, and Sonny Dykes moves over from SMU to TCU. So there seemed to be a lot of maybe some hurt feelings from the SMU side, from the fan base, from the players. I think it's we've seen more of that this year than kind of the just pure trash talk that we got leading into last season's game. Mm-hmm. I guess my first thing on this is we put out some polls to the fans and got some pretty good feedback. And the first one was regarding this game itself, and on TCU's schedule, is this the most important game of the season? If TCU were to win this game and lose kind of the big other rivalry games, would that be okay? Or is it okay to lose this game, and then as long as you win some of the others, is that better? The fans came back pretty strong, saying Texas and Baylor were pretty close as the most important games, and then SMU third, and then Texas Tech, I guess. We've already forgotten about the cactus emojis and all of that. We're not worried about that anymore. I don't know. What's your thought on this? I mean, I can see it in a lot of ways. The reason why I think it's an interesting question is TCU's lost 2 straight to the Ponies. both in Fort Worth, and went out and took their coach. And if after that still are losing that game, I think it feels like the program then is in a bad place. Maybe I'm putting too much stock in it. Um, but I think probably the correct answer to the poll question is that we want to beat Baylor. Anything that knocks Baylor down is a positive. But I can see how this game holds higher importance maybe than it has even some of the ones in the past.
Yeah, and I think again, I touched briefly on rivalry games and how a lot of rivalry games are kind of going away with the nature of conference realignment and TV deals and schools looking out for themselves, trying to put themselves in the best positions financially. And I think some fans maybe they wonder could we take SMU off the schedule and put another Power Five non-conference game. And I think games like that are nice, but I enjoy the TCU-SMU matchup personally. And I think this year I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been as much trash talk considering the amount of trash talk that we had last year. But I also think it's going to be so interesting because you have so many coaches, not just Sonny Dykes, but Garrett Riley and others who were on that SMU sideline and in that locker room when they came in to Amon G. Carter Stadium. And it's not even that SMU won the game. SMU was entirely more physical. They completely dominated that football game. And then you had players coming onto the field afterward. They put the flag in at the 50-yard line. I think TCU has got to come back into this game, and I think it's going to be a very physical football game. I think it's going to be a great environment in Dallas, and I love it. It's Dallas. Even the mayor they're talking about it's Dallas versus Fort Worth. I know TCU players have spoke to the media, and I'm extremely excited for it. I think it's great for TCU. I think it's great for college football that you keep scheduling games like this. And I think there are other opportunities to try and set up some non-conference matchups, like getting a matchup with Colorado, and I'm sure there are others down the line. But for the regional aspect of it, I think the players enjoy it. And Sonny Dykes, he's another guy who's been around the block long enough. He knows it's going to be a raucous environment. There are going to be people booing him, people calling him names, or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, it's football, and these two teams want to come out and play well and put on a good show, and the fans want to see an entertaining, competitive football game, and I think that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, as soon as that ball kicks off and there's that first snap, and then it's just football, and it'll be the TCU guys against the SMU guys, and it won't be all of that emotion and that history. I don't think that will play into it. But yeah, and your point about continuing to play the game. So that was the second part of the poll question to the fans, and they were pretty strong in agreement there that play it every year, play it home and home. Have that game in Dallas and bring them into Fort Worth every other year. So I think there were a couple of interesting responses to that. I think there's one option that was proposed. I'm looking it up now. So thanks at Doug Redgrave on Twitter. He responded with basically a way that SMU should be on a rotation with other of the Texas group of 5 schools. So you play UTSA, El Paso, North Texas, Rice. Every year you play one of those, and so every 4 or 5 years that's SMU. And I would see that as being that whatever that Texas TCU game would be is held in Fort Worth at Amon G. Carter. So I think that's a that's an approach that I think if TCU were a much larger brand, that's the way it would go. I mean, you don't see the Longhorns going to El Paso or going to,
Mhm.
to Rice. Um, so that's, I think that's a way to think of it. But yeah, that just the history of it. Plus, yeah, it's when it was TCU winning every year, and i- it's fun. It's fun to beat those guys, and I think the counter argument though is it legitimizes SMU as like, oh well, they get to host TCU every other year, and there's that. There's also there's really there's limited benefit to TCU of if TCU loses, it's the end of the world. If TCU wins, no one cares nationally, and that's you don't really want to set yourself up for that level of I don't know risk, that emotional risk. But uh, yeah, I think fan base was pretty clear, and I generally agree with you too that play the game and just go beat them every year, and then it's all fine.
Yeah, and you brought up the point about how there's a very low reward on, I guess, a national scene in today's age of college football, where there's so much weight that's put into style points, and it's not just about winning the game; it's how you won the game. Like a 30-point win against this team may not win as much as a 5-point win against this team based on who the team is. So I definitely see that argument as to, if SMU doesn't have a strong team and you lose, then you look really bad. But if you win, okay, yeah, well, you were supposed to beat them. I guess if I had a counter to that, I would say that SMU has been much better these last few years than they've been in the past. There have been multiple instances where SMU has been ranked in the top 25 and winning 8, 9, 10 games in a season. So if you want to be a national champion, it doesn't matter who you play. If it's SMU
That's
or
right.
Tarleton State or Alabama, you go out and win football games, and when it's all said and done, you're 13-0 and or 12-1. And if you want to be one of the top 4 teams in the country, make the playoff and be a national champion, you just got to go out and win football games. So um, I'm excited for the matchup, and I think it's going to be a very good game.
Yeah, and I don't think SMU's going anywhere either. I mean, in this, they've clearly shown a commitment to the NIL game where they're gonna work to bring in talent, and they in the future of the American Conference, they will be one of the top teams in that conference going forward. And in a world in the future with an expanded playoff where winning, whatever it is, the top 6 conference winners go to the playoff, they might be in line to be one of those conference winners that gets an automatic ticket into the playoff. So yeah, I think that the game will only carry more significance as it goes forward. And I don't think the Mustangs are going anywhere. All right, so maybe about this particular SMU football team and our thoughts on how they stack up against the Frogs. Um, Watched some of their game against Maryland last week, where they ended up losing on the road in College Park, but I I thought they were the better team. Watching the game, it felt like they had every opportunity to go and take that game, and just didn't. A lot of uh, one really controversial fumble call that I think the SMU fans are pretty upset about, and rightfully so. But a lot of opportunities in the red zone that either didn't turn into points or turned into field goals. That if those are touchdowns against Maryland or against TCU, things are going to be a problem. So I thought they even in losing that game, that Maryland offense in particular is really explosive, or has been generally, and they did a pretty good job handling Talia Tagovailoa and all those receiving talent, Raheem Jarrett and Demas and all of those guys. So I think they showed the path that they can take that can lead to a win over the Frogs from that game. I don't know if you caught much of that SMU Maryland game.
I did not, but I think just from watching rivalry matchups at whatever level it is, whether it's collegiate football or high school football or professional football, whatever's happened previously, I feel like just gets thrown out the window. It's an entirely new ball game, and it's almost like both teams are 0-0. And it's both teams trying to get to 1-0 and win that week. And for TCU, I think it's going to be really important to get off to a fast start. I thought TCU came out last year was very sluggish, and they were not able to take control of the game early on. And SMU was so much more assertive physically. The way that they ran the football down TCU's throat with multiple different guys. So I think, again, having coaches and a player like Alan Ali, who is going to be captaining this offensive line for TCU, who was on the other side of the field in that game, they're going to be getting on these guys to be mentally and physically ready to go for this game. They got to get off to a fast start. And we talked about it earlier in the podcast about making Tanner Mordecai uncomfortable. They can't allow him to have a clean pocket on his dropbacks like he did last year. You got to find a way to make him uncomfortable, and I think you got to find a way to find a couple turnovers. They gotta make a couple key plays there in the secondary or in the run game, force a fumble, steal a couple possessions somehow, because I think it's going to ultimately come down to a one-score game, just as a conservative prediction. We'll get to our predictions, I'm sure, in a little bit, but I think whoever wins the turnover margin is going to win the game, and TCU has been pretty good at taking care of the football so far, but we'll see what happens this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we know we've seen a version of Max Duggan that can turn the ball over, and we haven't seen that version really yet this season, but we know that it's in there. So hope that guy doesn't show up in Dallas Saturday morning. And yeah, I wonder if the 11 a.m. start time hurts any on the starting fast. I mean, I don't know the exact travel plans for the Frogs, but I imagine that it'll be that they'll stay in Fort Worth and then just drive over on the morning of the game. And then I don't know. It feels like that could cause a little bit of a sluggishness to come out of the gate. Just those morning games. I really wish this had been an afternoon or primetime game. I guess all fans kind of wish that generally across the board, but yeah. And you mentioned the run game from SMU. Goodness, last year just absolutely tore through the TCU defense. No more Ulysses Bentley for the Mustangs. He's off in Ole Miss with Zach Evans. But they brought in Alabama 5-star Kamar Wheaton. He hasn't really shown much yet, but he has the talent, and if he gets out there, maybe he can run wild. Trey Siggers is still there, able to take it to this TCU defense again. So I think that's going to be something to watch, is how does this new defensive scheme attack that SMU run game? We know that there's going to be big plays in the pass game, and that Mordecai is going to look to throw the ball all over the yard, but on those short yardage plays, that's where the game will be won or lost, is who can pick up those first downs when you're just kind of lining up and smashing heads. So I think we haven't really seen it yet from either side on what this is going to be. There's a lot of unknowns, so it'll be a really intriguing contest to find out how that all shakes out.
Want to get into our predictions here?
Let's see it. So the spread's actually been kind of jumping around crazy. It opened at SMU favored by 1.5 points.
Yeah, I see that.
Relatively quickly jumped to TCU by a point. When I wrote this this on our notes earlier, it was TCU favored by 2. I had seen that it might have jumped to 2.5, but in any case, I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen in this game, and so it's basically just okay. It'll be within a field goal one way or another. That's what the odds makers are putting it, with a point total on the game of 70.5. What do you think? What's your thought on the game? How's this going to shake out?
I would definitely go over on the 70.5. I think this is going to be a high scoring game. I shouldn't say I'm not exactly sure why. I think both teams have enough talent on offense and enough experience at the quarterback positions to have this be a high scoring game. I think both teams are going to want to get out to a quick start and play fast. I know playing fast on the offensive side has been an emphasis for TCU under Sonny Dykes, and just looking at the way some of these matchups have gone over the last few years, a lot of points have been scored. So I think I'm going to be a conservative here, but my final score prediction would be TCU 38, SMU 31. That's my final score prediction. I think it's going to be a close game throughout. I would be mildly surprised if this winds up in a blowout in one shape or the other. But I think TCU will move the ball just enough on offense and make enough stops on the other side to start off 3-0. So I'm going to go 38-31 Frogs.
I like it. That would be wonderful. Yeah, this point total, I feel like you can envision 90 points being scored more than you could envision, I don't know, 60 or fewer points being scored in this game. So the 70.5, I can feel like it being a high scoring game, going over that total. But I don't know. Maybe I'm still feeling purple glasses for this week. I feel like TCU comes out extremely motivated, extremely well coached, ready to go and take down this team from across the town. So I think it's more lopsided than a one score. I think we're looking more in the like 48 to 38, 35, maybe something like that.
And I just realized something. I can't do math for whatever reason.
You were under.
And 38 plus 31 is not more. So let's go.
No, just take the under. I think you're good. Take
1 to 34. That's
okay.
Let's go with that. Keep the 7-point spread, but I think the Frogs get over 40.
Okay. I like it. I think we're feeling confident in the Frogs, but anything, like you say, rivalry games, anything can happen in this one. And it will be an exciting time Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time, Dallas, Texas. Iron Skillet, exciting. Just quickly, we're over an hour, but we can quickly hit on some of the other stuff that's coming up this weekend. First off, around the Big 12, starting Thursday night, West Virginia is actually a short favorite at Virginia Tech. Mountaineers have had some, I don't know, bad luck, or maybe just Kansas is way better than everyone thought. But how are you feeling on the Mountaineers here traveling to Virginia Tech?
I think I was going to say this is a matchup where you have two teams with two coaches who could be on the hot seat. To be honest, with the way West Virginia started, and JT Daniels has seemingly found his home. He's played pretty well, with the exception of that pick six against Kansas. He's put up really good numbers, and Bryce Ford Wheaton has been a big playmaker for them. They've run the ball well, also. I don't know a whole lot about Virginia Tech other than a lot of their fans on Twitter seem to be very frustrated with how things are going for them. So that's that could be a rock fight to just try to stay alive and get a much needed win. Looking at some of these, Kansas and Duke are 3-0.
Whew.
Thought that the two basketball powers be unbeaten in football at this point, but Kansas, I think, has a big chance to pick up another win there and move to 4-0. And then Baylor, Iowa State, I could see that being a very tough game for the Bears. I know they just beat Texas State pretty handily, but Blake Shapen struggled a little bit, and I know they took him out of the game for a little while. They have a lot of inexperience at some of those skill positions. A lot of receivers and backs who've left over the last.
They lost a lot of talent off that team last year. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really dangerous game for the Bears, and Cyclones are actually favored there at home, but that's a tough one. Man, the Big 12 is just kind of stacked this week. I like the Texas Tech game as well. Another big sellout there. Texas Tech is going to be raucous, welcoming in the Longhorns. So I could see them, coming out of that, taking down the big dogs. But and then like I said earlier, the Kansas State Oklahoma game as well. Oklahoma 2-touchdown favorite, but Deuce Vaughn is in the nightmares of every Sooner fan. He has kind of owned them over his career so far, and it could be he has that capability anytime he could take a game. Just to go back on West Virginia, you touched on the coaching hot seat, man. I think what's his name? Neil Brown. Yeah, I think he's in trouble. Some of the coaching decisions he made in that Pitt game, and I think he might get run out of town before this one's done. And if they lose this one and then I think he's in trouble. That might be coming to an end there, which is unfortunate for them. All right. So quickly, the national games. I think the one of these that most interests me is Arkansas, Texas A&M. So Arkansas has climbed all the way up to number 10 in the AP poll, while Texas A&M is still somehow holding on to a spot down at number 23. But I think Texas A&M can come out and take this game from the Hogs. I've enjoyed watching Arkansas play. I think Raheem Sanders at running back is ridiculous. Jefferson, the quarterback, is fun to watch as well. But I think going into College Station, there's a chance they go in and lose that game, and then it kind of revalidates the Aggies back into the top 25, back into the conversation. They get their SEC win. They're coming off that Miami win. So even though they lost the game to App State, they can still start feeling okay about themselves hitting their gauntlet of SEC West scheduling.
Yeah, a couple quarterbacks to keep an eye on with some of these matchups. KJ Jefferson, obviously, in the Arkansas A&M game, and then also Florida at Tennessee. Anthony Richardson is another quarterback prospect, along with Jefferson, who some mock draft experts think could be top 5 quarterback prospects for the class of 23. when it's all said and done. And I know Florida has struggled a little bit recently here, and Richardson, I'm not sure if he's played very well in those games, but um, Tennessee is always a raucous environment to play in. That's going to be a great atmosphere there. And then Arkansas, I don't know what it is. Whenever I watch them, they always play well. It's not very frequently, but usually a couple times a year I see them play, and they usually play pretty well. So um, I think Florida could get a bounce back win at Tennessee, and I want to see Arkansas give it to A&M this weekend for sure.
All right, I think we'll wrap it up there. Obviously, thanks everybody for listening, for following along with us. Stay tuned in on frogsofwar.com. Follow us at frogsofwar. You'll be getting live tweets. I think we'll have folks in the student section. We'll have folks in the stadium this weekend, and so you might get some fun stuff there. Plenty coming, covering this game and covering everything TCU sports going forward. Any final words, Russ?
Just giving a go Frogs.
All right, go Frogs. Thanks everybody.
Follow on Twitter, follow us on Facebook. We're getting stuff posted online on a daily basis, and we're ready to get back into the steam of things with this football season and everything else going on in Funky Town. So exciting times.
It's all good. All right. Thanks, everyone.